Hello fellow crafters, Janine here, and today is going to be another watercolor exercise. And I say exercise because that's what these are. The last video when we came together with the watercolors, we did watercolor swatches, and this was an exercise. This was an exercise to see how the paints, what their true color was on watercolor paper, because sometimes they look different in the palette than they do on paper. And then part of the exercise, kind of sub-exercises there, were to see how the paints reacted when applied to wet paper, and then to see how they reacted when applied to dry paper. And then to do a color wheel of sorts, but in linear instead of in an actual circle, and to see how the cools blended, and the primary cools blended to make new colors, and how the primary warms did to make different colors. So that was our last exercise. This exercise, because let me back up just a little bit again. Because with this exercise, part of what I wanted to do is also see how they gradated. In other words, how you started with a stronger color and then pulled it down with water to get it to fade out from its deepest, truest tone to white. But I don't think I had enough room to work here within these little squares, so that's why you see longer rectangular shapes here. So I'm going to try this exercise over again to try and get a gradated effect. And I'm starting with a Simply Simmons No. 6 round. To me, just looking at the size of the space and what we were trying to accomplish, it looked like the right size brush to me. And I've got, of course, water and a towel on hand, so I can dry my brush, clean my brush and dry my brush in between. Actually, I'm going to have two separate jars of water. One for rinsing, and then one with clean water in case I need to get my brush or palette wet. And I've also got, to help keep my palette wet too, I've also got a spray bottle of water. So because that helps quite a bit. So with a wet brush, I'm going to go into my Cad Red, and from what I've seen in watching different artists do this, to demonstrate this technique, their brush is not overly wet with pigment, but not real dry either. Enough to get a good solid amount of paint here. Then rinse the brush. Get any drips off the ferrule, and then start to bring the color down the paper. Now what I'm not sure about is if we want to do this on dry paper or wet paper. So I think probably before it's over with, I'm going to do it both ways. And I think I kept going back up into the top color too much. So let me move on to the Alizarin Crimson. Load my paintbrush with that. This is actually a little bit harder than it looks. Now I'm curious, so I'm going to move away from these two a little bit and come down to the bottom row. And I'm going to wet the area first. Did flow a lot better wetting the paper first. I went back and drew too much color down, I think, so I came back with a clean wet brush and lifted some of it. Of course, now I just need to stop messing with it. I can see where this is truly a good exercise to start learning to get control of your water flow. And control the amount of color on your brush. I can see where doing a few pages of this would really hone that skill. Okay, in my first exercise, I did start this one on dry paper and tried to do the gradient wash down. And then I thought that, well, maybe if we wet the paper first, it will help get more of that gradient fade. And it worked really well on some colors, but not so great on others. I mean, there's still a gradient, like here on the Payne's Gray, but I didn't, I had too much paint going on, I think, and wasn't able to get it out till white. Like the lemon was a little bit easier. I think the darker the color, the harder it was, the lighter the color, the easier it was, which is obvious. You know, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to go back to this method and try and do this gradient fade on dry paper. And I've been thinking about it. I'm not really sure how to go about it. So we might try a few different methods until we find what works. So what I did was I just taped another piece of, sorry for all the noise with my chair, another piece of watercolor paper onto, this is just a little plastic placemat I got from the Dollar Tree. So it was only $1. It was cute and it's pretty on that side. But anyway, it's just plain white on the other side, so I thought it was good for this purpose. As sort of a craft mat. A more affordable craft mats solution. So I think what I'm going to do, or at least the way I think it's going to work, we're going to start that way at first anyway. is I'm gonna get a brush that's really, really wet with pigment, and I mixed my alizarin crimson and cadmium red up on this in their order. So I've got a brush that's really loaded with paint, really moist, really wet. Still not quite the effect I want. So I just rinsed my brush and now it's just wet. I'll move down to the phthalo blue. And maybe get my brush a little less wet with pigment this time, a little less wet with paint. Okay, I think I'm liking that effect a little bit better. Still not getting the wash out to white like I want, so I think we need to go with even less pigment. So let me move to the Cad Red. Okay, this time I dropped a really heavy pigment load right here at the top, rinsed my brush off, and so now I've just got a really damp brush. So that gave me a pretty nice even gradient wash doing it that way. So I think we're on to something here, folks. So I'm going to move on to the ultramarine blue. So I got a nice heavy pigment load on the brush. Rinse my brush off. So I have a nice damp brush. Okay, so I think the secret here is getting a nice heavy pigment load to start with. And of course it's going to change the amount to the size that you're working with. Obviously for a little tiny flower petal you wouldn't get nearly as much paint on your brush. and wouldn't be working with as big of a brush, I don't suppose. I'm going to switch brushes at this point and try something different. I gotta tell you, and quite honestly, I'm not enjoying the action of this brush too much. Now, this isn't exactly the brush I've seen other artists use, but it's a little bit bigger, and I don't know if maybe the flatness of it won't help a little bit. I don't love the brush stroke, but I do like that it did a better gradation. A little bit more even. Alright, I'm going to switch brushes again, and then I'll move into a larger Simply Simmons brush. This is a number 10. Get the Permanent Gamboge. Okay, if you're noticing what I'm doing here, and what seems to be giving me the best results, nice and even without a whole lot of brush stroking, is, I mean a lot of visible brush strokes, is again getting a heavy pigment load here, rinsing my brush, but still leaving it quite damp. I'm just wiping the water off the ferrule. And then tilting my mat so that the gravity will help me pull the water down and not have that blooming. And like right here, I've got this one too wet, so I just rinsed my brush and dried it a bit. Well, that gave me more of a flat wash. I was trying to be so clever and show you what I learned. Let me try again. Okay. I guess that's why you need to practice, practice, practice. The more you get techniques like this down, the easier it is when you get to painting an actual picture. So with the Payne's Gray, got a nice heavy pigment load. Rinse my brush. Wait. Still got a very moist brush. I did get rid of some excess drips from it. And again, I'm lifting my mat, letting gravity work for me a bit here. I'm going to dry my brush a little bit more. I still feel like I've got too much water. Yes, that one's working a little better. And we fade as we go down. Alright, last color is Sap Green. And that's that. Let me grab this other one. I don't know if I achieved better or worse results, honestly. This was with the wet paper, and I think I did get just a little bit more of an even fading of the color. This one, for me, it was on the dry paper, was a little bit more difficult to control. To me, I kept getting more of an even flat wash than I did a gradated wash. So I can see where this is definitely a technique that takes practice, and so I am going to continue to work on it and practice it, and you do the same. And please leave me some comments below and let me know how you're liking these watercolor exercises and practices, and if you're practicing along with me, I would love to know if you have suggestions, or if you have other things that you would like to see in this arena. Just leave me some comments. But anyway, I really appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate you taking this journey with me. And I think we're going to turn Mondays, because that seems to be when I'm releasing the majority of these watercolor videos, is on Mondays. So I think we're going to have a new Monday. I think we're going to call it Make It Colorful Mondays, or Make Mondays Colorful, something like that. So we're going to have, it's either going to be watercolor related or some other coloring related video is going to be on Mondays. We're going to make Mondays colorful, because Mondays are a tough day of the week for everybody. So let's lighten it up. Let's do something fun. Let's do something colorful with our time on Mondays. And let's create and make Monday a happy space instead of a dreaded Monday. But anyway, you guys have a very blessed day. Thank you so much for being here. And if you would like to help contribute to Janine's Craft Room so that I can bring more of this content to you, there's going to be an iCard right about there. And if you would, just click on that and feel free to donate. If that's not what you feel led to do, that is okay, because your presence here is such a blessing to me and such a help to me. You'll just never know. So as always, you guys have a very blessed day. Bye now.